Good evening, everybody. Welcome again, part two. We're going to dive into some more longevity hacks for you. Um, Again, thank you for attending the first call and everyone that's part of the actual challenge. We're going to keep things moving along and show you more things you can do and see how far we get. But in terms of what we did last time, I know there was a lot of amazing sort of experiences for people, and you learn stuff that seemed so simple but was so impactful. We're going to try and do the same again tonight. So there's a couple of guests joining us. I know most of you will see this after the fact, but for those of you that are here, we're going to allow some time for you to actually ask some questions also. So directly with the experts that are on here with us. So if you're joining here live, a little bit of bonus time for you to ask your questions. And what we're going to get in tonight. So last time we talked about how to breathe, and you learn such a simple thing can have such a massive outcome in terms of longevity, really turn the dial in terms of how you feel, stress levels, hormone levels, neurochemical activity. Like it's all affected by structure of the skull and volume of air, nitric oxide, removal of carbon dioxide, all of these things that you don't consider in this thing that we just in passing do. We breathe and don't even think about it. And what we're now going to learn is, well, what are you breathing? It's not just how you breathe, we learned. It's what are you breathing? What are you putting on your skin? What are you exposed to that is taking years away? And we've learned, all of you have learned, anyone here that has their DNA test in hand, you already know that of the many paths that you could come in from, whether it's fibromyalgia or breast cancer or migraines or skin issues, it all comes back to inflammation, right? The cells are not doing well. The cells are struggling. There's some kind of insult in the bloodstream that's creating a burden on the cells, and that leads to an inflammatory state. And then all of a sudden, keep that going, and something gets triggered that gets the label of a disease because it is progressed far beyond just the cell struggling. So, what causes that inflammation? Right? What we talked about last week was the breathing, the healing. How do you do things properly? But what's causing the cells to not do well? And in today's reality, it is so important to know that the threats are far beyond what we're genetically wired for. When you were born, your body thought that you were going to live a caveman or cavewoman's life. That's the instructions we have. That's the coding, the defense mechanisms that you're born with are for that purpose. But that's not how we live and where we live. You were born into a city. You were born into applying things on your body and eating things and breathing things that your body did not know it was going to have to deal with. And this is what we call a silent killer. It's in the background, not being put up front in terms of here's a conscious habit that I have to develop or a conscious removal of something because everyone's doing it and it just seems as taken for granted as normal when it's not. If you look at your internal wiring in your biology, it's not normal. It's not what we were designed for. And in that, I met someone who blew my mind in terms of how harmful one particular category is. And why am I bringing this up? Because you know who's here. If you're here, the majority are likely women, right? And I say that because we know that the part of healthcare, the segment that needs the most support is everything around female health. It's so misunderstood, so gray, so broken, and there's so many more problems, right? The same exposures equal two very different outcomes in a male body and a female body. And this is why women are struggling. And this is why our mission is to support that so much. So when I met Afshan, we were talking about her journey, and I'll just briefly tell you about that. And it's centered around infertility. And that infertility was just like any other condition diagnosed as the problem. You are not fertile. You have a problem. The womb is broken, right? That's the kind of things you hear. You have headaches, your head is broken. You have pain, that location is broken. You have the BRCA gene, go cut your breasts off, right? Everything is circled around, the conversations are all around the symptom and the location as opposed to the foundational biology layers before. And so she was able to go down the self-healing journey. And the exact industry that she works in happened to be the thing that was slowly killing her, that she unraveled, broke apart, and voila. And I say voila for a very intentional purpose, which I'm going to tell you in a second. She got pregnant. And not only that, she's very healthy. And she's now teaching people how problematic cosmetics are. The average woman applies 500 chemicals a day on her body. And men listening, pay attention because you're also using soaps, shampoos, sunscreens, 500 chemicals a day. If you take the cumulative load and look at it, by the end of the year, it's 4.5 pounds. 4.5 pounds of chemicals that you're applying if you add it all up. The average Western country woman, right? If you're using the average Western country products. And what that's doing for your cellular health, your hormones, and you wonder why somebody like Afshan can go from you will have no fertility, forget about it, to I'm having a baby, right? The internal mechanism that drives this gift that women have can be broken by something as simple as cosmetics. Later today, we're going to talk about another threat that's more airborne, more inhalation based. And that's why I said we learned how to breathe. Now we need to learn about what we breathe. And by talking about these two things and bringing your awareness to what you're exposing yourself to and what you're inhaling are a difference between do I want to live to 95 and ride my bicycle, or do I want to be in a hospital bed at 60 like the average American is, right? So, as I said, voila, all the way from France, Afshan is joining us at, what is it, 11 p.m. there? Midnight?
It's midnight.
It's midnight?
Yeah,
So she's
it's
taken her
12,
time at
12.
midnight to come and share this with you because of the impact it's had on her and the impact it can have on you. So first of all, thank you for doing that.
You're
You're up in
welcome.
the
Thank
middle
you
of
for
that.
having me, Kashif.
No, it's a pleasure. And so, I don't want to, I know that if I tell you go, that can continue for 3 hours straight. So I'll let you eventually go, right?
Yes.
But maybe tell us a little bit more about that story. And then Afshan has prepared some information because really she wanted to come here and share with you how dangerous this stuff is. And not only how dangerous it is, even the people that are telling you that their stuff is safe don't even know what safe is. This is another major problem. And this community, us here together today, have to know what safe is for ourselves, right? We need to know, at least we can know it, at least we can teach our families. And this doesn't need to be Debbie Downer doomsday. This is more about awareness so that you can remove all the nonsense that you didn't know was a problem and maybe replace or forget about certain habits that you shouldn't have and start to think about this differently because it's everywhere, prolific. It's everywhere in your home. So if you don't mind, and not to get too personal, but tell us how you got to where you are from the problem to how you're thriving.
Well, I come from a family of physicians. If we count my extended family, the uncles of my parents, etc., we have about 19, 20 physicians or medical professionals in the family. So from a very young age, I was very attuned to medical research and talking about medical research and looking up, medical research. And all my parents and all of their friends are physicians. So when at some point in my health and wellness journey, my body seemed to start breaking down. I had hormone dysregulation. Everything, none of my hormones were working at a fairly young age. Started in my early 30s. I had high prolactin, then I had hypothyroidism, then I had some other issue with my progesterone, my estrogen, endometriosis, and it was going on and on. And it started, the hormones in our body think about it, they are like a house of cards. They are the bottom cards that hold up the immune system. So when your hormones get out of whack, and you think you can put them back into place simply by taking a pill because it's your thyroid organ that produces your thyroid hormone. And so you just take a pill and it's back into place, right? That's not how it works. It might put the thyroid and your hormones back into place, but once they're off kilter, all of your immune system is out there. Your immune system is the house of cards built on top of your hormones. So it's very hard to put that immune system back into place just by taking, just by regulating your hormones. And so you start down the path of autoimmune inflammation. And my reaction to that autoimmune inflammation was food allergies. I had no idea. I had brain fog, I had bloated stomach, but I had no idea what was going on. Because I was lucky, I come from all of these, this family of physicians. My parents were like, go see this guy, go see this guy, go see this guy. And at some point, I saw two different doctors in two different countries using completely different tests come up with the same list of food allergies. I had a back scratch test in America by an allergist immunologist, and I had another blood test in France, and they came up with a fairly huge list. It was like 30 items. I was allergic to everything, dairy, eggs, soy, you name it, lentils, peas, spices. The only thing I could put in my mouth was meat, a few fruits, maybe some green beans. It was really, really difficult to regulate. And my doctor said, you should think about detoxing. And this was before I even, tried to get pregnant. I couldn't even think about getting pregnant. And I did detox. I started looking into detoxing. And one of the first things I realized when I looked into the research is that, and you have to understand that as Kashafi, as you said, I come from this family of physicians, but now I'm working in the beauty industry. And right away, when I start looking at the world of detoxing, well, what does medical research tells you? Medical research tells you need to detox in 5 areas to really, truly detox. One area is, your cosmetics, what the beauty industry calls cosmetics, which is really anything that, it's not makeup, it's anything that touches your skin. Baby wipes is considered a cosmetic product. Hair, shampoo, conditioner, face wash, hand wash, all of this is cosmetic. So you need to detox your beauty and bath care is one area. You need to detox your food and water. You need to detox, your household cleaning supplies, fashion, because there's a lot of BPA, a lot of lead, a lot of endocrine disrupting chemicals, PFAS, the forever chemicals in your fashion and in most synthetic fibers. And you need to detox other things you come into contact with, plastics in the kitchen, receipts that are filled with BPA, etc. So these are the 5 areas. The thing is that research will tell you that, we've been looking at how these impacts on human health, and we've gotten to a point in the medical research where researchers now want to know, how can we detox? What's the most effective way of stopping this environmental exposure? And so what they do is they take a group of people and they measure the toxin levels in their blood and their urine, and then they divvy up the group, and they take one group and they replace their bath and beauty products with clean ones. Another group, they switch out their food and water. Another group, they'll, switch out maybe their household cleaning supplies. And another group, like their environmental, things that they come in contact with, plastics in the kitchen, etc. And then after a while, they retest. And then they'll tell you, okay, you had this much % reduction of toxins per group. When I came to the cosmetics group, 60 to 88% reduction. There was a 60 to 88% reduction of toxins. Yeah, in a very short time, like maybe 2 weeks, just by switching out the cosmetics. Then this statistic, these numbers were repeatable. When they would repeat the studies, same type of statistics would come up. Well, the other groups didn't have as large a percentage reduction. That was the first thing that came out in the research. And the other thing is then it's not always repeatable. So to me, what that tells me is that chemical body burden is really still, coming in from the bath and beauty products. And it is so very important to detox these, make sure you're using products that don't have like toxins in them. That's the first thing it tells me. The second thing it tells me is that, people may not realize the importance of detoxing these products, and that's why they're not detoxing them, or it's not that they're not detoxing, they in fact are buying clean beauty products, but they're going down to their Target aisle, picking up something that's marked clean beauty, and in fact, it's not clean. And the fact of the matter is that today in America, we don't really have a no tox industry. There's no such thing as products out there except made by boutique beauty brands. The big beauty brands do not have products, or even a line of products that are absolutely zero toxin or no toxin. So, this idea of clean beauty, how clean is it? It's not very clean, unfortunately. And it's not because it's not possible. There are a host of myriad of reasons. A big one is just money. They make a lot of money. And the clean beauty industry got started around 2013, 2015. And it was built on a premise that said, well, aren't all these bad toxins really synthetic? Aren't they all derived from petrochemicals, and they're all derived from synthetics? So let's do this. Let's just switch to organic and or natural, substances, and we'll be good. And, since then, we've had a plethora of research proving that there are tons and tons of organic and natural substances that are actually very toxic as well. And so the part of the reason that we don't have a very clean beauty industry is because they don't update themselves on the research. They go on this old idea, and it ends up, creating situations where there is no chief ingredient officer at these brands. They don't look at, any of the medical research, so they don't know what's happening. And so supposedly we have this amazing clean beauty industry, but in fact, our situation is getting worse and worse and worse. And now I'll come to the pregnancy safe cosmetics part. A lot of people ask me, but why did you why focus on pregnancy? Why not just call your company like No Tox? Because my company has two main objectives. One is to raise awareness on toxic ingredients in beauty and personal care products. And the second objective is to provide products that are truly clean, truly safe. And so it's true that everything I talk about, affects everyone. Really, if you ask me what are all the, what are all the age groups that get affected, I'll say that environmental toxins will start affecting you when you are but an antecedent to an egg or a sperm inside your mother's body, which is being carried by your grandmother, because that's really when the exposure starts. When your grandmother carried your parent and you were but an antecedent, just an egg or a sperm, and your grandmother was exposed, guess what? It's come right into you. Exposure to these toxins have been proven by medical study to go that far, and it continues till you die. But we've reached a tipping point with human reproduction and fertility. And that tipping point, I'm going to now tell you how bad it is. Once you hear the statistics, you'll understand why I chose to focus on this wellness definition of pregnancy, which starts at the preconception stage through pregnancy and ends when you're done breastfeeding. Because all of these toxins, by the way, cross the placental barrier. They pass into a mother's milk. They are found in the meconian poop of newborns. They're found in the placenta. It's pretty bad. So just to give you a sense of how dire the situation is, there's a woman by the name of Shauna Swan. She's a reproductive epidemiologist. In the 1970s, she started looking at data from the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. And she saw that sperm counts were falling. And she said, this can't be right. It looks like they're falling 1% a year. Can't be this bad. Let me try to tweak the research studies and come up with, a lower percent decline. Let me see if I can get something different. And she couldn't. She did a 40-year study with population sizes like crazy, 55,000 men, 128,000 pregnant women, very, very large populations over a very long time, 40 years. And what she found was that in 1971, the average sperm count in America was 97 million per milliliter. That had halved by 2011. We were down to 47 million per milliliter. This is a significant number because the World Health Organization says that at 40 million per milliliter, every couple will have trouble getting pregnant. Well, she recently, when she was charting that decline, it was 1.1% a year. Now, recently, she decided to update those numbers. So she went out again and started tracking sperm count decline. Now, we are well below 40 million per milliliter, and the rate of decline is 2.63%. And according to projections, in America, somewhere between 2045 and 2066, the average sperm count in American male will be zero. Zero. So, and this is why environmental factors. It's only environmental factors. It's not genetics, it's toxins. Now, that's just sperm count. 1 in 3 women seek assisted fertility to get pregnant. 1 in 6 couples is not 1 in 8, 1 in 6 couples are deemed infertile. The population that is most exposed to endocrine disrupting chemicals and environmental toxins, according to the CDC, is the Black population, Black females. And they also have the highest rates of miscarriage. The miscarriage rate used to be 25%, but in 2018, it was measured at 30%, and it's increasing 1% a year. So 2018, by 2038, they're saying it could go to 50%. So we are just at a tipping point. And this is not just happening in America, it's happening globally. Every other article, you see all the information that I'm talking about. It's not just in PubMed. It's reported by the New York Times, the BBC, the National Geographic, the Guardian paper. It's global. It's a global phenomenon. So the reason why I chose to start Pregnancy Safe Cosmetics was because this is the area that we're being hit the hardest. That doesn't mean that it's not, we don't see the effects in later in life. Of course we do. These environmental toxins are responsible for obesity. You can look up the word obesogens, and they're basically environmental toxins that basically push obesity and increase obesity. Then they're tied to metabolic disease, cardiovascular disease. They're tied to cancer. They're tied to mitochondrial dysfunction. I just put up a post about environmental toxins and their tie to neurodegenerative disease. When mitochondrial dysfunction happens, you end up down the path to Parkinson's. There have been environmental toxins, connected to dementia, and dementia has been reversed when you detox. There's a doctor by the name of Dale Bresden who has been all over the news, talking about how I wouldn't say he cures, but he treats Alzheimer's in a way where the patients don't get Alzheimer's. They're Alzheimer's survivors. And a big part of his program is detoxing. So detoxing is really, really important. And with that, maybe I'll pause and I can, because I've been talking a long time, but then I can get into, what are the major categories of toxins and how to find clean products and what to look for, if you'd like.
Yeah, that would be great. I think that it really would benefit people to know what to look out for, right? Because people don't know. If you see it on a bottle, you presume FDA allowed this, so it must be good. But there's a video that everybody should look for. I think I posted it on Instagram at some point, of this hearing where there's I think it's a senator from California who's interviewing the president of the FDA and asking them very direct questions, saying things along the lines of, when a child's shampoo is known to have cancer-causing chemicals in it, do you intervene? And the answer is no. Is there a screening process to know if these are allowed? No. And it just goes on and on and on, where it's like, we are hands off. We are Food and Drug Administration, but we don't administer anything when it comes to food and drugs. That's kind of like the answer you get. So with this part's really important. Everybody, you'll get the recording, but take some notes of what to actually be looking for, because this is what most people don't know. And thank you for sharing that.
Well, first of all, the FDA has just instantiated MACRA, the Modernization of the Cosmetics Regulation Act. So that is supposed to change. They gave themselves the right to recall a product. I don't know if they'll really use it. So far, they've actually been giving a hard time to those companies that are smaller, and also those companies that are, creating products mostly are organic and natural, because they have a very short list of approved ingredients that are okay to use, that are organic or natural. But we'll see how that goes. So first, let me just pause for 5 seconds and tell you, if you're interested in any of this research, you should follow my Instagram account. It's at Pregnancy Safe Cosmetics. The word pregnancy, the word safe, the words cosmetics with an S, and squished all together. Follow that Instagram account, because I post every day to every week studies and very useful information. I will start in December, January, doing product reviews on my YouTube channel, which is really brand new, and there are hardly any. There's like two, maybe, I don't know, like 2 videos up. But subscribe to my YouTube channel, Pregnancy Safe Cosmetics. And then if you would like our list of ingredients to avoid in a PDF form, make sure you subscribe to our newsletter on my website. It's www.pregnancy-safecosmetics.com. Don't worry about being inundated. I have not sent out even one newsletter yet. And I do not believe in using newsletters as sales agents. I hate getting a newsletter every week and every day and being bombarded. So I won't do it to you. But I will, if there's a recall, if there's a course I'm offering, if there's a list of ingredients to avoid that I've updated, I'll send it out by the newsletter. I will announce it on Instagram, but Instagram doesn't, they'll take a small amount of people and send you a post to them. And if they don't click on it, then they kind of bury it. So definitely sign up to, my newsletter on my website and my Instagram account. So, and in terms of, if you're looking for certain products, this is the last little pitch I'll do. I'm coming out with a face wash and a hand and body wash that is pretty much no tox. I mean, it's no tox as far as I know. And we are taking pre-orders for that now. It probably won't be shipped until the end of the year, but go ahead and pre-order it. And I do have some eye makeup if you like to wear, eyeshadow and mascara and eyeliner. So check out my website, www.pregnancy-safecosmetics.com/shop. So I'm sure you're going to find something, and there are even gifts for pregnant women. So if you know someone who's pregnant, have at it. Okay, so how do you know if your products are safe? Let's talk about apps first. There are a bunch of apps, Paula's Choice, there's the EWG website, there's Clearia. I find that if the app tells you that something is really bad, let's say on EWG, for example, 1 is good, 0 to 1 is good, and 10 is like danger. If it tells you it's at 8, 9, 10, get out of there. Like, don't use it. End of story. But if it tells you that it's a 1, 2, 3, or it gives you this kind of like, tells you it's safe, don't trust it. Why do I say that? I say that because most people in the beauty industry, the people who built these apps, even people at EWG Verified, don't update they just don't stay updated on the research very well. I actually had to email EWG Verified and tell them that certain ingredients that they listed as safe were not safe. And then they changed they changed it. So now they have the correct, listing. They have it listed as an 8. So if it tells you it's safe, go to a vetted list of ingredients to avoid. Our list is based on the nonprofit organization's campaign for safe cosmetics list, and then we add to it. We add to it because, for example, on my list, I will have rosemary extract, which stops embryo implantation. It's not going to bother you if you're not trying to conceive, but if you're trying to conceive, I list it and I tell you on my list of ingredients to avoid. This is why you want to avoid it. And then with certain ingredients, I like to get very specific. Like I said, the beauty industry will tell you synthetics are bad and organics are good. That's not really true. A titanium dioxide is a completely organic substance, and yet it's a carcinogen. It comes in 3 forms. It comes in, and you'll find it in your eyeshadow, you'll find it in your lipstick. Imagine ingesting a carcinogen on your lips. The beauty industry will tell you, well, it comes in 3 forms. It comes as a food additive, and we don't use the food additive. It comes in nanoparticle grade. It comes in pigment grade. Well, the problem with that business is that the food additive is banned in the EU. California is trying to ban it, or it has just recently banned it. So it's a known carcinogen. It causes cancer. The nanoparticle form also causes cancer. It's very small particles, so it goes right into your bloodstream. If you inhale it, if you ingest it, if it penetrates through the skin, it causes cancer. So that's also a problem. It's mostly it's in foundations, it's in sunscreens, the nano grade, and then there's the pigment grade. Well, problem with the pigment grade, there are 2 problems. One of them is that the beauty industry will tell you, oh, pigment grade has very large particles. It doesn't penetrate the skin very far, so it can't get into your blood. I don't buy that. I don't buy that because it's mostly in eyeshadows, and the skin on your eyes very thin. And did they do the test on the eyes? Probably not. And what about on the lips? It's in virtually every lipstick on the planet, and you're ingesting it. You're eating that titanium dioxide. If it's banned as a food additive, why would you want it on your lips to ingest? And it's an organic substance, but the beauty industry will defend it till the cows come home. I don't defend it. Titanium dioxide, I run from the hills from it. So that's a good example of where these apps will fail you. You have to just instead go to a vetted list of ingredients to avoid if it tells you it's safe, and really check the list. And if you need a list tomorrow, go check out Campaign for Safe Cosmetics. It's safecosmetics.org. They have a great list. It's kind of onery to get through because you have to click and click and click and click and click. And we are taking their list, adding to that, and trying to put it into a very palpable PDF. So hopefully you'll get that. You'll subscribe to the newsletter, and you'll get that by the end of the year. So that's how I would find out, what if you do it the old way. You kind of look at the bottle and you find out what's good and what's not. As a general rule of thumb, most toxins are synthetic. So it used to be, and I still kind of agree with this, if you decide to buy a product that is certified organic or certified natural, you're not going to have any parabens, phthalates, you're not going to have any fragrance. If it's certified organic or certified natural, the fragrance will be naturally derived. And then you only have to worry about a handful of ingredients. So here are the handful. Get ready, get your pen out. Sodium benzoate, titanium dioxide, essential oils. Essential oils are endocrine disrupting. If it has an essential oil or essential oil derivative, run from the hills. You also don't want talc. You don't want rosemary extract. And I think those are the big ones that you often find in virtually every organic or natural product. The key thing when you're buying natural or organic products is to make sure it has a certification, folks, because unfortunately, a lot of companies will certify 1 ingredient or 2 ingredients, and they'll stick the USD organic label on it. Try, if you can, to get a product that's EcoCert certified. You're not allowed to put that EcoCert label, which is European certification. It's one of the highest standards for natural and organic certification. Why is it the highest standard? Well, first, if it's carrying the EcoCert label, it's 98 to 100% natural. Number one. Number two, Europe bans 2,500 ingredients and America bans 11. So you want a European certification because they're not going to, anything that's certified EcoCert they're not going to contain the 2,500. So I would say, and my face wash is EcoCert certified, and so is my hand and body wash. And I'm working on getting the eye products certified as well. So, that's what I like to do. Kind of go for a product that's as natural, as organic as possible, and then make sure it doesn't have the bad organic ingredients. What are they? Essential oils, rosemary extract if you're trying to get pregnant, sodium benzoate, titanium dioxide, talc. Those are the big ones. So I hope that was helpful. Kashif, do you have some more questions?
Yeah, so and now the products that claim to be low, or they claim to be detox or no tox, but they're actually low tox, right? Meaning that you're saying that they're trying, either they're misinformed or they're unscrupulous, whatever the reason is. What are those? Is it the same ingredients you just said that those guys are also using?
So to be very honest with you, almost the entire industry in America is a low tox industry. I always end up they fall into one or two categories. Either they will have synthetic ingredients. So the synthetic ingredients, obviously you don't want, they're so long. If I went through the list, I would be here like 3 hours, but,
Yeah.
but you don't want parabens, phthalates, unfortunately, the forever chemicals, the PFAS, they're not even listed. The 1,4 dioxane, it's not even listed. There are a bunch of, then you have 1,2 hexandiol. You don't want it. You have phenoxyethanol. You don't want it. You have so many of these acrylic polymers, anything with a polymer, you don't want it. And again, they're pretty much listed on the Campaign for Safe Cosmetics, and they will be updated. I will update that list, but before the end of the year on my website and in my newsletter. So get that. But basically, to answer your question, all the products out there, almost all of them, except for small boutique beauty brands like mine, who've bothered to do the research, they all contain either an essential oil, if they're on the organic side, or one of these, they'll contain phenoxyethanol, or they'll contain sodium benzoate, or they'll contain something, rosemary extract. They'll contain 1,2 hexandiol, which is cytotoxic. They'll all contain something. So and I think I would say, toxicologists will tell you, doctors will tell you, everyone will tell you, oh, there's no such thing as no tox. We can have a no tox industry, but nobody is doing it except very small boutique beauty brands. There's MG Naturals out of Australia that's creating titanium dioxide free makeup. It's great, but we have unfortunately, they can only sell in Australia. I don't think they're certified to sell. They're allowed to sell here because they didn't. Cosmetics highly regulated, and you can't just create something in one country and then sell it in another. Even if I were trying to sell my products to Canadians, I'd have to register the product there before I could sell them to Canadians. So usually you get one thing somewhere and then another thing somewhere, and there's very small beauty brands that are actually doing the no tox. Otherwise, to be honest with you, it's low tox. How low is it? Some beauty brands, they just take out 3 ingredients and they call themselves clean. So that's why I say you really have to start learning the list of ingredients to avoid. There's no way around it.
There's a question here. I'll just answer a couple of these. Christy, you're asking about the app. Go in the chat, and B's listed the safecosmetics.org. So literally what Afshan's saying is the apps are misinformed because a lot of them are running off of environmental working groups data, which is a little outdated. It's better than not knowing anything, but it's still not really solving the problem. So
That's right.
yeah, go to safecosmetics.org and then also sign up for Afshan's newsletter. That's the most current list of what we know. And the anonymous is asking about men versus women. It's the same outcome. So these chemicals in a man or a woman, the difference is the amount of hormone disruption. Men may not notice the hormone disruption as much because they're not as estrogenized. For a woman, it's like flash in the pan, like right away you start to feel problems, right?
Actually, Kashif, to be honest with you, it's worse for men because
Yeah,
you're not, women's bodies can handle extreme amounts of estrogen. When we're pregnant, our estrogen goes through the roof. So even though it will wreak havoc in our bodies, it doesn't create the kind of havoc that it does in a man. You know, dropping sperm counts is not just dropping sperm counts. It's men with lowered sperm counts have a lot of other problems, from cardiovascular health to diabetes
right.
to you name it, neurodegenerative issues. They have issues with inflammation where the cells are not speaking to each other. They have mitochondrial dysfunction. The man's bodies cannot handle this level of estrogen. And if you look at the rates of cancer that have increased, you know, estrogen feeds cancer. So
Right.
the rates of prostate cancer have gone through the roof. The rates of breast cancer have gone through the roof. And it's just, yeah, it's just as bad for men. I would say the only difference for men is that maybe they don't, you know, take in 1,500 chemicals a day, you know, because you know, they're just some
Different
say
smoke.
500, some say 1,500 for women. It's like
Right.
ridiculous. The average woman uses a minimum of 12 products a day on her face.
Yeah. So there's a question that came up a few times, which was almost certainly going to come up, which is if you're going and looking around for health and wellness type information, you're told to use essential oils. You can go to a health and wellness conference, and you even go to a biohacking, like cutting edge health conferences, and people are offering essential oils. So the big question is, this stuff is supposed to cure problems. Why is it such a problem? What's the actual problem with essential oils?
So let me tell you the story behind that. In 2018, well, Shauna Swan finished her big study in 2011. The research paper started coming out, and her research was focused on synthetics. The entire, like all there's an association called the Association for North American Endocrinologists. And that means that all of the North American, like all the endocrinologists in Canada and in America, got together for their 100th annual meeting in Chicago in 2018 and made an announcement. And they said, we're so glad that everyone's all abuzz about these synthetic endocrine disruptors, but we'd like to announce that we believe that essential oils are endocrine disrupting. We have seen rates of the rate of I always mess up the formal name for it, but it's when prepubescent boys sprout breasts. It's I can never say it. My dad says it perfectly, but anyway, it's when prepubescent boys sprout breasts, and the rate of that condition was going through the roof. So they asked the FDA to actually do something about it. So the FDA then commissioned the National Institute for Environmental Health Sciences to do a study. Now, prior to this, the only types of studies that were done were very, how can you say it, technologically unsound, because what they would do is they'd take a group of boys that were exposed to certain essential oils like lavender and tea tree oil, and then another group of boys that were not exposed, and they would say, oh, they have the same rate of that one group doesn't have more, rate of hormonal dysfunction than the other. The National Institute for Environmental Health Sciences says we can do better than that. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take an essential oil and in its various components, because essential oils are complex. So they took 8 or 9 different components of essential oils, individually introduced it into the human body, and watched the hormone receptor to see what it would do. Would it attach or would it not attach? In all cases, 100% of every single component, the hormone receptor woke up and attached, which means it's endocrine disrupting. The body thinks it's a hormone, but it's not. So that's what I like to say. A hat is a hat, whether you got a sombrero or a baseball cap. And an endocrine disruptor is an endocrine disruptor because it disrupts your hormones. And essential oils are endocrine disrupting. They are also fetal toxic and embryo toxic. They cause preeclampsia, fetal growth retardation. I posted the studies on my Instagram. They are hugely problematic. So, I mean, I know that people think, oh, it really helped them in one way or another, but you know, uh, so does popping prednisone when I'm having like a massive loads of inflammation. I mean, should I be popping prednisone?
Mm.
You know, but back in the day when I was dealing with my food allergies, I'd walk around with like a bottle of 20 milligrams of prednisone and I'd pop it daily. You know, that I'm not disputing that it can help people feel better, but it's I'm against it because I really do think that long term, either you think about it like a medicine and then you find someone who's like specialized in it, but I think long term you're just kind of screwing with your hormones. I don't know.
Yeah. And people are asking about, what about diffusers, inhalation? What we're saying is it's entering your body, whether you breathe it, put it on your skin, it's
Oh, so
getting.
let me tell you about that. So, again, when it comes to inhalation, like most people will put eucalyptus in their diffusers, eucalyptus essential oil, and it actually causes seizures in most notably in children under 5, but even in adults. And my daughter's first daycare provider, when we were leaving San Francisco area and going to France, she was pregnant and she didn't tell me that she was using. She didn't, and she ended up in the hospital. And when she came out, I said, "Gosh, what happened?" And she said, "I was having seizures, and they couldn't figure out why I was having seizures." And I said, "Did you diffuse essential oil?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Did you put eucalyptus essential oil in your diffuser?" And she's like, "Yeah." Well, she had a seizure. So while she was pregnant. So, it's not just some freaky study somewhere. It's for real. No, it absolutely, whether you inhale it or whether you have it in your body. And essential oils are one of the chief reasons why you will have a very tough time finding products that are even, that are organic, natural, but zero tox. And why do we need essential oils in there? It's just for the smell. You take out that one ingredient, you have so many almost products, but then they've got the essential oil in it. And I'm sorry to say, but phthalates and BPA are endocrine disrupting, and there's no reason to think that essential oils do less harm. I don't believe they do less harm. I do believe they do as much harm because we have already so many studies on the harm that they do. So, I mean, prepubescent boys sprouting breasts, it cannot be good for their puberty.
Yeah.
It cannot be good.
No.
It's serious.
It's now almost 1 a.m. where you are.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm sure at some point you have to wake up in the morning, get to work. So I want to thank you for, the time you gave us because, I'm sure eye-opening for a lot of people, in terms of knowing what's real. And a lot of times it's no fault of the actual manufacturers. They don't know. There's some quality control person that's on the EWG website or reading the latest guidance, and it's just way far behind what's true and what's real.
Yeah. And let me just say, they're about 7 to 10 years behind in the research, unfortunately. The titanium dioxide stuff, I mean, there's a lady that follows me who just came out with a brand of lipstick called Addition Beauty, and she talks about it as beauty, like a lipstick that's good for not having hormone disruptors. And she got a doctor who's very, very like vocal against hormone disruption, and Dr. Laura Shaheen, to talk about it and to promote it. Unfortunately, though, at the end of the day, neither Dr. Laura Shaheen nor this woman knew about titanium dioxide. There are studies that titanium dioxide as, plastic, I mean, has been found in the meconian poop of newborns. The title of the study says toxic to human reproduction, carcinogenic, genotoxic. So when you get down to these levels, it's pretty bad. And even the Campaign for Safe Cosmetics is about 5 years old. The data on their website is about 5 years old. And so I would say really do consider just signing up for my newsletter, because there are a lot of essential oils you wouldn't know are essential oils, like eugenol. And did you know that eugenol, eugenol, is an essential oil? How about linalool? How about, there are these, if you work in the industry, you see it, oh, that's an essential oil derivative, or that's an essential oil, but it's not marked as essential oil. It's just some name. It sounds like it's derived from geranium or something, but it's not. It's essential oil. So
I mean, this is very, again, like I said, eye-opening is the best way to explain what just happened here. Because it's right in front of us, but we don't see it. And now you're helping us see it, which is, I think, change lives, which is the point here. We want to know what the threats are. There's things we can do, but there's also things we can avoid. And that's what you're going to help us with. So thank you with that. And like Afshan said, go to the newsletter so that you can get updated. The PDF's available. Take some time with safecosmetics.org. Take a look at her products, even if you want to replace, like she has her face wash coming out, start replacing, and that's part of what we're going to talk about later tonight.
My face wash it has plum extract in it, and it will take like 5 years off your face because it plumps up the collagen in your face. It's amazing. So it's not just safe, it's safe and it has an aesthetic effect. And I will also say that, if you would like my projects, support it by buy something in the shop, because every time I hit like 10,000 units, I can actually go and have another SKU, I can come up with a new product. So definitely check it out.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Go to bed. 1
Okay.
a.m. Time for you to sleep.
I will have to look at the rest of this. I'm eager to hear about mold and mycotoxins. Are you going to talk about?
Yeah, you have no idea who's coming. So I knighted him about 3-4 months ago. We did a podcast together, and I realized that he's the Earl of Mold.
Oh God.
Jason Earl. He was named for a purpose. And it was
Wow.
to tell the world about a threat that we all have that we don't know about. And we're going to bring him on now. But just so everyone knows, Jason, when it comes to the info, there's a lot of hidden mold threats, just like what we just went through here. The eye-opening, like, oh, there's also that. There's essential oils. Like, I was told that this is something I'm supposed to do. And it's the same thing with this concept of mold. I can go into my basement and sniff around and get a yes or a no. But it's far more problematic than that. And this is what we need to know. So with that, Afshan, thank you. Stick around, listen, but we're going to
Yes,
bring
thank you.
Jason on.
Okay.
Hey, Jason, you just need to unmute yourself if you're there. There he is. How are you doing?
Excellent. How are you?
Good, man. So I think everybody already knows, unlike what we just talked about, everybody already knows mold is a problem, right? But they don't know how prolific the problem is. They don't know what to look for, where to look, right? And they don't know where it's coming from. And there's so much work that you've done. Same story, and you hear the best stories of a healer, a solution bringer, is somebody that had to crawl out of the grave and fix themselves. Which it's Afshan's story, like literally was failing at life in terms of her health. Now she's thriving. Jason struggling for so long and finding this one thing that changed everything. And now he's a thriving entrepreneur helping people everywhere out of the same sort of problem that he had. So if you don't mind, maybe tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll get into some of what people need to know.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Cash. And it's a pleasure to be here. So my story began when I was about 4 years old. And I'll give you the truncated version of it here. But I suddenly lost a lot of weight in a 3-week period, and my parents took me to the pediatrician, who said that they should take me to the hospital. So we went to Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, which is a renowned respiratory clinic, about an hour away from my house. And they diagnosed me initially with cystic fibrosis, which was a devastating diagnosis by any measure, but especially to my father, who'd lost 4 of his cousins to CF before the age of 14. So they spent the next 6 weeks crying while they waited for a second opinion, which fortunately was that I didn't have CF, don't have CF, evidenced by the fact that I'm standing here at 47 years old. But actually I had asthma accompanied by pneumonia. And when they tested me for allergies, I was positive for every single thing they tested me for. So it was grass, wheat, corn, eggs, dogs, cats, even cotton. So my clothes itched my whole childhood. And when I was about 12, my folks split up, and I moved out of that moldy farmhouse, and all my symptoms went away. And it was chalked up to what they call spontaneous adolescent remission back then, which basically means they have no idea what happened. And it was, kind of a logical conclusion, because my grandfather had grown out of his asthma too. So perhaps, I mean, he lived in the same house. So, and that is a common occurrence with asthma. But in my case, it would take me another decade or so before I would come to the conclusion and put the pieces of the puzzle together. So fast forward, my mother died in that same house 2 years later, which actually is relevant. And she died by her own hand, suicide. And then I had Lyme disease a year later, which was diagnosed with Lyme disease, which disproportionately affects those who are sensitive to mold. And then fast forward, I ended up spending 9 years on Wall Street. There's skipping over some stuff here, but essentially I after 9 years, I became disenchanted and went on walkabout. And when I was traveling, I found myself reading quite a bit, and I was transfixed by a story about a guy who had developed adult onset asthma at 40 years old, and all these allergies and sensitivities that he never had before. And he blamed it on the building he was working in. He blamed it on the hotel where there was a huge mold problem. And so it was like a light bulb went on for me, because I remembered the musty smell. I ended up calling my dad and asked him if he thought we had mold, and he just laughed at me. He's like, "Of course, we had mushrooms in the basement. Why do you ask?" So I connected the dots instantly. It was just, for me, it just seemed so logical. But what was really amazing to me and the big epiphany was that the buildings that we live in can actually make you sick. I had never thought about that before. That was such a new concept for me. And that was 21 years ago. That's now something that's sort of in the zeitgeist. But back then it was a really new idea. And so I rolled up my sleeves and came back to New Jersey and ended up working for a basement waterproofing company that was doing mold remediation. And just, it was a trial by fire kind of a thing. I ended up starting an inspection company to help people avoid the trials and tribulations that come from dealing with most mold remediation contractors. And I was actually led around, believe it or not, our most important tool was a mold sniffing dog named Oreo, who actually taught me where mold hides. And she was also great for marketing purposes. So the press loved us, and I just got trial by fire, really an education by immersion. And so ultimately, I was able to get this really high volume of inspections without having to pay for any advertising. And I learned in depth exactly where these things happen. And so ultimately, what also happened was I started to really see what made people sick and what didn't. And it's more than mold, but it's also within the mold space. It's more than mycotoxins, which is I think something that will be surprising to most people on this call.
And for everyone listening, if you take the story we just heard from Afshan and you listen to Jason's story, they're like mirroring each other, right? It's the same story with a different character. One was cosmetics, one was mold. The allergy issues, the neural issues, the mood issue, like all of what comes out of the body being in a funk, exposed to what it's not designed for, leads to all these symptoms that we have to put names on. And now look at the both of them. Look at Jason's brain. I wish I could speak like him, right? Like the ability to function at a high optimal level, meaning that thing didn't exist. That thing was the body struggling, and remove it, and you have this amazing human behind it, right? And that ability why do I bring this up? What are we talking about here today? And during this whole challenge is your options around longevity. It's optional how you're going to feel. It's optional how long you're going to live. It's optional how good you feel today while you're in this challenge and moving forward. So the things you do, the habits you adopt, whatever you remove from your life, whatever you add to your life, will net you your outcome. And two people who both said they were struggling are now thriving. So reversible, changeable, different trajectory, different path, different outcome. So, thanks for sharing the personal story, but now let's get into mold,
Sure thing.
and one of the things you just said was something you taught me, that the structures we live in are not designed like our ancestral structures to be mold. They are mold magnets, right? Just in terms of raw material.
Indeed, indeed. And it's crazy because it's like the proverbial boiling frog, right? So this goes back to really before World War II. We used to build houses that were built to last. They were made of stone and brick and concrete and old growth timber. They were also hard to heat and cool because the walls generally weren't insulated, but they were inherently low in chemicals, which is very important. They were also mold resistant. They had something called drying potential, which means that water gets into the building, but it also dried pretty quickly. And so around World War II, after World War II, the baby boomers, the demand created by them led to the development of a lot of fast and cheap building materials. And the sort of the apex of that is drywall, sheetrock, which is essentially a mold sandwich. It's the perfect growth medium for mold. It gets wet, absorbs water, and it's got paper on both sides, which is one of the favorite foods of mold. And so that was sort of the first innovation. Of course, innovations often come with a cost. And so we were able to build these fast buildings, but they were also, by the way, recent research has identified that almost all commercial drywall actually comes pre-inoculated with Stachybotrys and Chatomium spores, which are well known as water damage indicators, and also some of the more toxigenic species. So we build self-composting buildings now, just add water and at scale. But then you fast forward a little bit, and then around the 1970s, we started closing those buildings up to save energy during the fuel crisis. And that also meant that we stuffed the walls with fluffy insulation. A lot of that insulation, by the way, is loaded with formaldehyde, the pink and yellow stuff in particular. So not only was it fluffy insulation that absorbed water when water gets in the walls, but it's also filled with VOCs, carcinogenic VOCs. Very important point. Our building material companies are chemical companies. Same thing with our food companies, of course, and pharmaceutical companies, but our building material companies are chemical companies. And they have an innocent until proven guilty philosophy that they operate with. And so this is a lot of the problem why this stuff is hard to unwind. And so you've got these really tight buildings and then we began slathering them with petroleum-based products. So it's not just mold, it's the VOCs, the chemical load. And because they're so tight, there's no air exchange. So fresh air from outside just doesn't make it in. And so, we breathe 13 to 15 times a minute. And if you do the math on that, it comes out to over 20,000 times a day. So you have to think about that like 20,000 doses. These things are cumulative. And so when we're doing that and we're rebreathing the same air in our buildings, we're having major exposure. So it's unbelievable. Then you fast forward a little bit further, and we've also hyper sanitized. Everybody's afraid of bacteria, and so we've slathered our buildings with antimicrobials, and essentially what we've done is destroyed the microbiome, the natural microbiome that was inherent in our ancestral structures. That taught our immune system what was normal in the environment, and that was all coming from outside, background in your region. One of the reasons they say to have pollen or a bee pollen or local honey is so that you get that kind of data. Your immune system learns from that. But we have disconnected ourselves from nature so much through this very slow process of developing these hermetically sealed paper mache chemical boxes that get moldy very quickly when they get wet. And then we sit inside there. And now, because with COVID, most of us don't even leave the house. We don't even commute to another place and get some other sick air, So, we have slowly, like I said, that boiling frog slowly gotten to the point where we have completely disconnected ourselves from our true heritage, which is, the word human comes from humus, which is soil. And and we're so far away from that with our rubber bottom shoes and everything's sterilized. So this is 114 million single family homes built like this throughout the country. But here's the good news, and there is good news, believe it or not. And it's hard to have a conversation about toxins without bringing this up. The good news is that once you're aware of this, same thing with the cosmetics. Once you're aware of this, unlike the outdoor environment, which we can control very little of, the indoor environment, we have a tremendous amount of potential for control if you know the problem and you get educated about the things that you can do. And that's really why we're here today.
So if you don't mind, explain VOCs, because first of all, what is it? And second, you had a brilliant explanation over people focusing on the mold when there's so much more that they need to focus on that actually makes them sick. So if you don't mind, dive into that.
Absolutely. So VOCs stands for volatile organic compounds. So a very common example of that is alcohol, right? It's a liquid at one temperature and then it evaporates at room temperature. Other ones that are common are the chemicals that are in gasoline, like benzene and industrial solvents. These things that usually have an aromatic. They usually smell a little bit, but sometimes they don't. These are formaldehyde is probably the most well known, and has a very minimal odor, at the threshold which causes human sickness. Many of them, if not most of them, are carcinogenic, but almost all of them will impact you adversely in terms of neurological functions. So headaches, nausea, dizziness, fatigue, some of those kinds of symptoms are extremely common, but they're also neurotoxic, and they can lead to other more serious issues like Parkinsonian-like symptoms and mitochondrial disorders and all sorts of things like that. And so VOCs typically are man-made. They are, the byproduct of chemistry at large, often petroleum-based. However, and this is a really, really important price, probably the most important connection between these things, is that microbes, mold in particular, but also bacteria that grows in water-damaged buildings, also produce VOCs. In fact, we produce VOCs, right? When we're digesting, our gas is VOCs primarily. And so we're really not digesting our food so much as we're ambulatory composters. We've got a partnership with Ancient Microbes, and so we're partnering with that. Those guys are friendly, and we want those guys, right? And we also want them on us and around us, but we don't want them growing in our building. And so what happens is when mold grows, it releases enzymes onto the material that it's trying to eat. So let's talk about sheetrock. The spore lands, there's enough moisture, the right temperature, all the same stuff we like, by the way. It needs to have some food, it needs to have a comfortable temperature. They're aerobic, they need oxygen too. So contrary to popular opinion, they're not growing inside of you except for in your respiratory tract if you have a fungal infection. But they need all the same stuff that we do. So if you've got mold growing on a wall, it's digesting the materials outside of itself. It doesn't have a stomach, right? So it's releasing enzymes. And as it does that, it frees up these stable compounds, which like cellulose, which is what the paper in drywall is made of. And it releases, it gets what it wants, and then it releases basically mold burps, for lack of a better term. And those burps are comprised of industrial-like solvents, alcohols, ketones, aldehydes, a variety of, we see benzene coming off of actively growing mold in some cases. So that's a group 1 carcinogen. And so it's not uncommon for people who have a significant mold exposure, which produces these VOCs, to also develop chemical sensitivities. We see this a lot. Chronic mold exposure, especially people who live in a musty building or work in a musty building, will develop chemical sensitivities often. And the same is also true in the obverse, where people who have a chronic VOC exposure, right? So oftentimes in an industrial or sort of an occupational setting, right? They will often develop mold sensitivities. And the reason for that is because essentially they're the same chemicals. And so the body becomes hypersensitive to both, sort of in a wholesale manner. So everyone's concerned about mycotoxins, and they should be, because mycotoxins are very real. However, the primary route is actually not in the air, which is also very counterintuitive. And so when you're looking at mold produces spores, which are the seeds, and they can be, they can cause all sorts of irritations and allergic reactions, and they can carry little bits of the mycotoxins. Then you got the MVOCs, or the microbial VOCs we just mentioned. And then you've also got these mycotoxins. So across those three, you can argue that they all have toxigenic potential. So this is why we're here. And then there's also the man-made stuff. And so that the VOC, you can't separate them really when you're talking about indoor air quality, because they're a Venn diagram and they amplify each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And the mycotoxins, I guess what you're saying is that you hinted at that's not just what's coming from the mold, but what we have inside or what?
Yeah, so the mycotoxins are produced by molds specifically to inhibit the growth of other molds and bacteria. So the most famous mycotoxin is actually penicillin. And that was discovered by Dr. Alexander Fleming when a colony grew on a dish of Streptococcus bacteria that he was culturing in his lab, and he noticed a little ring around it. And that ring around it, which he initially called mold juice, it's a very technical term, was later isolated by a couple of other very fastidious scientists, and then turned into penicillin. And so mycotoxins have this kind of a funny thing, the way scientists do this. The naming conventions largely revolve around the use of the compound. So mycotoxins kill things you don't want to kill, and antibiotics kill the things you do want to kill. But in this case, they're the same thing. And so mycotoxins, only about 100 out of the 100,000 or so molds actually produce mycotoxins, which is really interesting. Yet they're blamed for all mold-related illness, and just doesn't make sense, because I've been in thousands and thousands and thousands of homes and done testing in 99% of them. And we've seen lots of sickness where there's no presence of mycotoxin producing molds. But in almost all cases, you've got either microbial VOCs or VOCs present, or a combination thereof often. And so the most common route of mycotoxin exposure, and this is going to be troubling to practitioners here who use these mycotoxin urine tests. But the primary route for mycotoxin exposure is actually food. And this is well established in the research, depending upon what research you read. But it's well established in the research, and there's strong data that shows that these things do not become airborne. They don't become airborne by themselves, first of all, and that's a very important point. Mycotoxins are not volatile, which means that they don't evaporate. They're sticky, kind of oily substances, because mold doesn't care. Mold actually wants to protect its area, and so it produces these things, these chemicals that actually kind of stick to the surface. So the way they become airborne is when things are disturbed and they're on the spores and bits of dust. So in order for you to be exposed to mycotoxins in the air, you have to have high spore counts, and you also have, or a very dusty environment that has a lot of fungal growth. So essentially, it's going to be a dense environment with lots of fungal matter. So mycotoxins are very, very seriously misunderstood. And what's also interesting about that, back to the MVOCs, because this is kind of the full circle, is that recent animal studies have shown that musty smell, the MVOCs, and that's what this is. It's the musty smell, which has long been considered an aesthetic nuisance and nothing more. Animal studies have shown that in fruit flies in particular, that fruit flies that are exposed to this actually stop producing dopamine. They start flying down instead of to the light. They stop reproducing. They essentially become depressed. Longer exposures, they develop locomotor disorder, Parkinsonian-like symptoms, so effectively neurotoxicity, premature death, and mitochondrial damage. And so, Brown University did a study in 2008 and concluded, after studying 6,000 participants who said that they had mold, and then also reported their sort of mental state, with a quality of life assessment. And they found a strong correlation between mold and dampness indoors and depression, which brought me back to home, literally, because my mother had mental illness and she was an alcoholic. And so nobody knows really what happened there. You can't really unravel that. But in retrospect, it couldn't have helped, because that was a very musty home. And now we know that there's a correlation between psychiatric disease and mold exposure. But it was unclear at the time in 2008 what that was, what the causal component was. But we now know from these animal studies, and there have been more that have verified those findings, that exposure to the musty smell can impact you in much more serious ways than people typically thought, in terms of the headaches and the nausea, or even just the allergic and sort of asthmatic type of responses. So in essence, to put a point on it, they're molds that are blamed, all the mycotoxin molds, or the toxic mold, the black toxic mold, this thing that the media loves to promote, and many practitioners and many inspectors love to promote. Watch out for that black toxic mold. That assumes that the other molds are okay, that you can have those growing and that's okay. But the data is very strong that all mold growth indoors of significance has the potential for toxicity.
So where does you do mold testing, right? Which is a brilliant offer to be able to help people through this. that word you use, significant. So is there a certain threshold we're looking for? Are we assuming that every home has mold, but then there becomes a danger level, or is it kind of like 0 to some number?
Yeah, actually, you know, I mean, if you really, Kingdom fungi is an abundant producer of particles, of spores. We live on planet fungi, really, and we build our buildings out of mold loving materials, and so there really is no way to avoid mold. And fun fact, actually, Kingdom fungi, which includes mushrooms and yeasts and mold, so that's the whole kit and caboodle, produces 50 megatons of spores every year. That's the equivalent of 500,000 blue whales. Okay, that's 20 times the amount of tea that's drank by the entire planet every year. Okay, and most of those land in the ocean and on the mountaintops and everything else. And so, you know, they end up essentially composting. But the bottom line is that we are abundant. These things are abundant, and there's no getting away from spores. So that means that every house, yes, has mold, but not every house has a mold problem. And that's an important distinction. And the way that you make that distinction is by saying, well, a mold problem is actually a moisture problem. And that's the thing. So mold is a symptom of a moisture problem. Mold is not the problem. It creates problems, but mold is not the problem. You will never have a mold problem in your house unless you have a moisture problem. So you kind of use the mold, or at least we do professionally, as the way to find the moisture problem. You know, if you can find the mold because it produces scent, it's visible in many cases, but not all cases. Very important. Hidden mold is a major threat because the microbial VOCs can come through the wall, but the spores can't, right? And so every house has mold. In fact, the Lawrence Berkeley Labs concluded that about 47% of homes have a mold or moisture problem of significance in the United States. And so it's a big number. It's a really big number. And then you've got this sort of Venn diagram of the homes that are affected and then the people that are susceptible. But given enough time, you'll see that mold's like kryptonite. It will take people that were typically not reactive, and over time, if there's a chronic exposure, you'll start to see symptoms, and they may be sort of subtle, right? Like sleep disturbances or fatigue or weight loss or weight gain. And, you know, so these things, they affect everybody differently. But the bottom line is that mold, every house has mold, and it's a healthy thing, by the way, to have spores to the level of what's outside. That's actually teaching your body. It's a hormetic stressor to have small amounts of exposure, background exposure to molds and pollens and all these airborne things. But when we're in buildings, what happens is when mold grows, it produces the gases. Again, these very tight buildings, it produces the spores, and they are abundant. And also in some cases where there's mycotoxin producing molds, the toxins can also travel on these spores. And so you end up rebreathing that highly concentrated air on 20,000 times a day. And that's where we get into trouble.
Yeah, the homes are, I mean, the purpose is, like you said, rapid development versus living in a human way. It's more like living in a commercial way. But there's a couple of questions here. And one, you know, they're both around like taking action. You know, what do I do? And one is, if I have mold in the house, so yes, there's a test, by the way, to answer, Simona. In fact, if you go to the chat, Jason was kind enough to offer everybody a discount. Whoever's attending, whether you're live tonight or you see the recording, he's offered you a discount for being here tonight. And it's in the chat. So just click on that link, copy paste, and you'll get the discount when you use the promo code. Michael just pasted that into the chat. Now, the question that Dirk asked, you know, what do I do? Go rip my drywall down and remove my insulation and get rid of my plywood and get rid of my carpet and glue? So there's this one, like, okay, I'm going to test and know. What do you then do? You know, because you're still in this home and you're not going to tear it down. So what's the recourse?
Well, it depends on the situation. You know, the short answer, which is not really, you know, the easiest answer to take, is that every situation is different. So when you're dealing with a mold problem specifically, because VOCs are a whole different ball of wax. But if you're dealing with a mold problem, the first thing you want to do is figure out where the moisture is coming from. That moisture comes in liquid form or vapor form. essentially. And it comes from the inside or the outside. And so figuring out those dynamics is the first deal. And if that's beyond your ability to do that diagnostic, then usually the best step is to find a qualified specialist who can do that diagnostic work for you. You're talking about physics. I mean, and so you don't want to hire a home inspector type guy to do this, right? This takes some experience and training. And it's not something that there's like an academic track for either. So the bottom line is that you first need to figure out where you have a moisture problem or where there was a moisture problem. And usually these things do not fix themselves. So if you had one and it wasn't fixed, you probably still do. It could be intermittent, but the bottom line is that's where you have to start. And first you fix that. Then you back from there. Then you go to figure out where the extent of the mold is, right? So that's kind of ground zero, wherever the moisture is coming in. And that moisture, by the way, can come in and create high humidity, which can then manifest as significant, widespread, low-level growth all over, let's say, a basement. It's very common for there not to be any visible moisture in a basement, but high humidity, right? Because concrete will suck water out of the soil and then exhale it into the air, and then you end up with high humidity in this cool, damp place, which is sort of what mold loves. Contrary to popular opinion, it doesn't have to be hot or, I mean, yes, it does. Certain molds love it like that, but there's so many species, and there's sort of like a combination lock for each one of them. And so there's mold will grow in almost any climate, by the way. There are thermophiles that love hot and cold. There are technophiles that actually will grow on metal these days. It's crazy. And there are ones that will actually eat jet fuel and oil spills. And so fungi loves to eat, and there's a fungi for everything. But in all cases, it requires moisture. So first you get the moisture, then you find the mold. And then testing is a really important part of that, because once you've identified where there's actual growth on a surface, right? Mold does not grow in the air. It only grows on surfaces. So once you find where it's growing on surfaces, then you test. Now, sometimes you can test to find out where the likely visible, where the mold is likely growing on a surface. So whether you can use a kit like ours, which uses spore traps. Spore traps are these really ingenious little cartridges, these engineered cassettes that capture the airborne particles, including spores. And so we use our methodology, which is consensus accepted across the industry. It's the most well accepted method for mold testing globally. It requires an outside sample, right? Because mold spores are abundant outside. Ideally, you've got lots of air exchange in your house, and mold spores are coming in from outside. And so when you test your air inside, you test your air outside, it should look about the same. That's a healthy home. A healthy home has background mold spores in it that look a lot like outside. So what our algorithm looks at is, are there different kinds of molds and different concentrations indoors versus outdoors? And then from room to room to room, and our kits, we allow you, we have 1, 2, and 3 room kits. And then 1, 2, and 3 room refills. So once you buy a kit, it comes with an air sampling pump, which you get to keep, and then you can refill and retest again for less. But you can see very clearly the difference in the ecologies, really, from one room to the next, and that will often help you get to the point where you know where the mold is. But also follow the nose. You don't always smell a musty smell because of the way air flows within a building, and a lot of people mask these things. That's another thing. Going back to the VOCs, and also echoing some of the concerns from your previous speaker, Afshan, essential oils, and fragrances. These are bad news. And if your house smells bad and you want to mask it, the chances are what smells bad isn't good. And then you just added something even worse. So you're just piling stuff on. You're better off actually knowing the truth and getting to the root of it, which is often, by the way, a moisture problem or a microbial issue. That's almost all odors are coming either from chemicals or microbes. And so sometimes they're on our body, but they're oftentimes in our building. And so getting some testing done to help you figure out what the extent of the mold problem is, and also in your initial discovery is a really great step. And then if you need to hire an inspector, I will encourage you to not do free inspections. Free inspections are sales calls. You want to pay someone good money, but you want to make sure that they're an independent, meaning they're not affiliated with a remediation contractor, They're qualified that this is what they do. This is all they do. They're not a home inspector who also does some mold testing. They do sick building investigations. And you also want to make sure that they're not going to use tests like ERMI. ERMI is a very popular test within the functional health community. ERMI is an acronym for Environmental Relative Moldiness Index, and it was developed by the EPA. It was developed by some staffers at the EPA about 20 years ago, and it uses a PCR, but it's wildly prone to false positives. And I've investigated hundreds of homes that had high ERMIs, and was only able to verify significant mold problems in about 10% of them. So it's a real problem, and it's abused by inspectors who are affiliated with remediators because it almost guarantees a remediation project. And then remediators love to use it for clearance testing because it almost guarantees that they're going to have to do more work. So you want to stay away from inspectors that use ERMI. You want to stay away from ERMI, period. And you want to stay away from anyone who's doing mold and remediations and inspections. Remediators doing inspections, it's like, don't ask a barber if you need a haircut, right? So you want to be very careful about who you invite into your home to do these diagnostics and make sure that they have your best interest at heart.
So there's a couple of last thoughts here. So people have questions around visual cues. So there's a question around using a dehumidifier to reduce humidity, and then there's questions around cues. So somebody saying the black mold I see in my shower, how bad is that? Somebody else saying I see effervescence on my cinder block, a little bit of moisture, how bad is that? Somebody else saying biofilm in water. So are there other cues we can use like visuals? And what do you think about the benefit of dehumidifying?
Dehumidifier. So you want to keep your humidity between 40 and 60% at all times. It's hard during the winter because it gets too dry sometimes, and during the summer it gets too moist. So you want to monitor that, and digital humidity gauges, especially ones that have a kind of a base station and then remote sensors, very, very important tools. And dehumidifiers, you want to make sure you don't put a sensor near a dehumidifier. You want to put it across the room because the air, of course, next to a dehumidifier is going to be artificially dry. Efflorescence, which is that white dust that it almost looks like crystalline. A lot of people call us and think it's mold. That is a clear indicator of moisture on the other side of that block, on the other side of that concrete. So that's a clear sign that you need to get the grading or the gutters to terminate further away from the building, because then you're going to end up with that evaporation effect that I mentioned. So that's very important. In terms of visual clues or cues, you're looking for any signs of moisture, right? And so this is like, I think about this like, you know how to tie your shoes, you know how to brush your teeth. We all live in buildings and breathe air, and we all live on a water planet. So like, you need to know this stuff, because this is where your ability, your locus of control resides, is your ability to identify these things so you can move quickly, because mold grows within 24 to 48 hours of a moisture problem. So you have to move quickly. So you're looking for any signs of moisture: staining, blistering paint, trim pulling away, rust, especially if you pull away the corners of carpet, especially in basements or on slabs. If you're suspicious, pull the corner of the carpet away and you'll see the tack strips. Oftentimes they're moldy or they're rusty. Oftentimes you'll also see little water bugs, those little rat guys that curl up into a circle. So you want to watch out for that. Spider webs are a big clue that there's dampness, because they also like water too. All the things that they need are all part of that same ecosystem, and so they're sort of at the top of the food chain in your home until the rodents come, and then you've got real problems. But ultimately, you're looking for any signs of moisture, and of course, visible mold. And that can be subtle. Sometimes you need a really good flashlight to be able to see that. But you always say, if you see something, smell something, or feel something, do something, and do it quickly, because again, you got 24 to 48 hours. Usually, if you've got a water damage issue, the insurance will cover water damage in that time frame. But once you go beyond 72 hours and you need to bring in professional remediators, insurance doesn't cover that in the United States.
Well, Jason, I want to thank you, because you came here with the intention of just giving information and educating everyone what you did, right? And then we asked you, is it possible to get a discount on your test? And you immediately said, yeah, no problem. So you provided that. So that's in the chat. Michael just to put it in there. So anyone that wants it, it's there. Jason was kind enough to not only give us time, but a discount on the test. So thank you. We're going to jump to our challenge. So thanks again, Jason, for taking the time.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome to stick around and listen if you like, but again, thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, guys. So what did you hear today? You heard that, just like we've been saying all along, how you feel and how long you live is a choice. And it's not a single choice, it's the constant choices you're making. You know, what are you breathing? What are you eating? How do you maintain not only your car, we're all good at that, following the service schedule, but how do you maintain your body through all of its interactions with everything from your food to your cosmetics to now your home, the structure that you live in, right? And so we've learned that there's maybe a lot of you maybe are aware and doing these things, but some of us are not aware. It's completely outside of our awareness, and it's until it's bad. And a lot of these areas, we are taught to think that way, that it's not a big deal until it's bad. Unless I have a flood in my basement where I need to call the insurance company, mold will never happen, right? Mold is something that indicates a catastrophe. No, it's something that can be slowly trickling away in the basement or in some other part of your home. And why is it that there's certain kids that have asthma and certain kids that are genetically the exact same don't? It's the constant trickle, the exposure, right? So the intention today was to show you that everything that we bucket and what we call environmental health is silent. It takes time to progress and cause problems, but because it's silent, it sticks around, right? So it's that thing that you just can't figure out. And so start to understand your environmental health, meaning everything that you breathe, everything that goes on your skin, all of your exposures. Where do you work? Where do you sleep? Where do you play? And what is all of what your body is now having to handle because of those choices? There's certain things that you can remove, right? There's certain places that you shouldn't go. And there's certain things you can add, like you can get a test, or you can add a detox supplement, or you can remove a cosmetic, and maybe you, instead of getting sunscreen, you get healthy so that your skin is actually able to endure the sun, so the intention here today was that to show you two stories of two very real people that had very real problems that don't have them anymore. So they started to make the right choices. And all of a sudden their health trajectory and every other trajectory completely changed. With Jason's cystic fibrosis, false condition, it wasn't real, but all the symptoms were there. Would he be running a successful business and being able to speak with us here today and, doing all the things he's doing? So complete different trajectory, not only in health, but everything attached to that life, and whatever you're able to give back to this world. So the homework this week, you were given a website and you were giving a mailing list and you were given a threat in terms of inhalation. You need to purge. It's very difficult to just pick apart and slowly look. I'm going to look at my makeup. I'm going to look at this week. It's a total cumulative load. So whatever is lingering is still causing a problem. So take your environmental health into consideration and know that this is one of those things that you can control. We're not talking about buying a $20,000, hyperbaric oxygen chamber to make you live forever. We're not talking about getting $30,000, $40,000 stem cell treatment to live forever. We're saying here's the reason why somebody keeps needing that oxygen treatment, because they haven't gotten rid of the trigger, right? They haven't removed all of what's causing the problem. By the way, before we continue, there's a free ebook that Jason also offered. So we're going to share this with you guys. There's an ebook that allows you just to dig deeper into the topic and maybe educate yourself, and maybe you can share with other people that weren't here. So send it to friends and family so that they can also learn. And I'm actually going to click and open this right now myself and probably dig it into tonight. I got it open now. So that's the challenge here, is to know that the total cumulative load, your eyes are now open. You now see there's another threat. It's what am I putting on my skin? What am I putting in my hair? I don't have that problem, but some of you might. What am I using to clean my skin? What am I using for sunscreen? And then the place that I live, you spend majority of your time indoors, right? Whether you're at work or you're at home, that's our reality today. So this simple thing of knowing that there's a potential threat indoors that is, again, that silent killer in the background that causes so many problems, but all of those symptoms get labeled as what you're feeling. You have depression, you have eczema, you have migraines, right? You have asthma, and all those things get treated. And now imagine continuing to treat those things while you're still submitting yourself to the environment that caused it in the first place, instead of just pulling the plug on the root. Let me just get rid of the trigger. What does that change in terms of your longevity, in terms of your health span, the quality of life, how you're going to feel in 10 years, whether you decided to unplug or not, right? So this is the homework for this week, which is dig into Jason's ebook, learn and share, right? Share with friends and family. Dig into the mailing, the PDF that you're going to get from Afshan's mailing list, and purge. Get rid of everything. It could be painful. I know those Sephora bills add up, and you have your collection of makeup. Even some women just like to look at it and know that they have their trinkets on the counter. It is a threat. Learn what is a threat and remove it. Get it out of your environment. It's a big thing to do because that stuff costs you money. It's what you're used to. You still have a need. What do I do about my cosmetics? It's very difficult to make changes unless you get rid of what you're reliant on. So get rid of it. Remove it. Look at your soap, your shampoo, your sunscreen, your lipsticks, your foundations, all of it, and see if it passes the test or not. And if it doesn't, get rid of it. Purge. It's a purge week. Get rid of it. If you're able to test for mold. If you're able to scan your environment and know, because we don't know, there could be a silent trickle in the background that's developing that could lead to other things, or maybe it's already there. Maybe it's already at a level where you're feeling what you're feeling because of that and everything else. And that question of like, I've done everything right. Why do I still feel like this? Maybe that's it. So again, that was the intention today. We're keeping this challenge going. Do these things, consider environmental health a major factor in longevity that doesn't get spoken of because it's not a sexy gadget or a fancy flashy machine that looks so cool on Instagram. It's just foundational grassroots work, right? Very practical threats and very practical change, which is get rid of it, test, know, and then make the changes you need. So do that this week, dig in, and do it for your whole family, not just yourself. Share with friends and family. Get the list from Afshan, share it. Get the ebook from Jason, share it. Start to change people around you. Become that ambassador of health. And that's what you're doing. So with that, thank you for joining us again. The intention was to inform you. That's why we brought these two amazing people on tonight that have the information in their brilliant minds to give you. You now need to get to work. So thanks again, guys. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Afshan. We'll leave you to it. We'll leave the links open for a little bit in case you need to open or download or save. And we'll see you at the next challenge.